The morning sun gleamed off the glass-paneled exterior of Carlton West, one of the tallest buildings in Midtown Manhattan. On the 30th floor, the boardroom was filled with executives in dark suits and tailored dresses, their eyes fixed on one man. Miles Everhart, 36-year-old tech billionaire and CEO of Everhart Dynamics. He stood at the head of the long marble table, mid-presentation. His voice sharp, calculated, and compelling. Then, without warning, it happened. His words cut off mid-sentence. He staggered. A glass of water slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. One hand clutched his chest, the other reaching for the edge of the table. His knees buckled. "Miles," someone called. He collapsed. Gasps filled the room. A few executives jumped back from the table. A woman screamed. Phones were drawn, not to call 911 but to record. Nobody moved to help. 2 floors down, Sophie Layton, 28, was scrubbing the hallway baseboards with her back to the elevators. Her golden hair was neatly twisted into a low bun, though a few strands had come loose. Her uniform was spotless despite the bleach smell clinging to it. She moved quietly with practiced rhythm. Then she heard it. Shouting, panicked voices from the stairwell overhead. Something about someone collapsing, a man not breathing. She stood, heart skipping. Without hesitating, she grabbed her cleaning cart and rushed to the elevator. It was locked to her badge. She turned and bolted for the stairwell, racing up 2 flights. Breath short, lungs burning, she burst into the boardroom that a man in a suit tried to block her. "This is a private," she pushed past him. "Move." There on the floor lay Miles Everhart, motionless. His face was pale gray. His lips tinged with blue. His chest was still. "Has anyone called 911? She demanded. No answer. "Does anyone know CPR? Few heads shook. A woman muttered something about legal risk. Sophie didn't wait. She dropped to her knees beside him, pressed 2 fingers to his neck. No pulse. Without hesitation, she laced her fingers together and began chest compressions, 30 steady, forceful pumps. Sweat beaded at her temples. Her arms ached, but she didn't slow. She tilted his head back, pinched his nose, and gave 2 full breaths. A man at the end of the room pointed, horrified. "Is she kissing him? She's trying something. Someone stop her." "No," Sophie snapped between breaths. "I'm doing CPR. He's in cardiac arrest." But no one helped. A few backed away, murmuring. Some still recorded. Her voice softened. "Come on," she whispered to him. "Come back. You're not done." More compressions. More breath. Suddenly a cough. Then another. Miles lurched, his body convulsing as air returned to his lungs. He rolled to his side, gasping and wheezing. A hush fell over the room. Sophie sat back on her heels, breathless, trembling. Her lips were streaked with blood from where Miles had bitten down in seizure. Her palms were raw. Her eyes locked with his just for a second. His were wide, unfocused, but alive, and then, without a word, she stood. She didn't wait for praise. Didn't look for thanks. She walked past the frozen faces, past the executives who had said nothing, done nothing. As she left, she grabbed a tissue from her cart and dabbed at her mouth, wincing slightly at the sting. The elevator doors opened for her this time. Someone must have unlocked it. She stepped in, pressed the button for the basement, and exhaled. Inside the janitor's closet, she stared at herself in the small mirror above the sink. Her bun was a mess. Her face was flushed. She splashed cold water on her cheeks, then laughed under her breath. Just once, dry and disbelieving. She grabbed a clean cloth, tucked it into her belt, and returned to her cart. Without missing a beat, she went back to mopping the same stretch of floor she had been cleaning 10 minutes earlier. It was like nothing had ever happened. The evening air in Harlem was thick with the sounds of a city winding down. Honking cars, distant sirens, the hum of conversation from an open window across the alley. Inside a 3rd-floor walk-up, Sophie Layton moved through her small apartment with quiet efficiency. The wallpaper peeled at the corners. The heater knocked like an old engine, but everything was clean, painfully so, scrubbed by tired hands that needed anything to stay steady. "Dinner's ready," she called softly. 4-year-old Leia sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring a picture of a cat with a purple crayon worn down to a nub. She looked up with a grin. "Is it noodles again?" Sophie chuckled and held up 2 paper bowls of instant ramen. "Gourmet as always." She set the bowls down on the wobbly table, then settled into the chair across from her daughter. Leia dug in eagerly. Sophie stirred hers more out of habit than hunger. Her eyes were heavy. Her arms ached from the strain of CPR, but she said nothing about what had happened at work. Not yet. Not when Leia was smiling. Instead, she told a made-up story about a silly cat who got lost in a library and fell asleep on the dictionary. Leia giggled, noodles hanging from her mouth. Later, after a quick bath in the small tub and a lullaby hummed more than sung, Leia curled into bed with her old stuffed bear. Sophie kissed her forehead and whispered, "Good night, baby. Dream something soft." She sat alone in the kitchen afterward, staring at the unopened envelope on the counter. Her rent notice, 3 days late again. Still, she went to bed telling herself, "At least I still have the job." Morning came cold and gray. Sophie dressed in her uniform, carefully tying her hair into its usual neat bun. She added a dab of lip balm to cover the cracked spot on her mouth where Miles had bitten down. It still hurt when she smiled. Leia was still asleep when she slipped out the door. The subway was unusually quiet. Sophie kept her head down, earbuds in, though she wasn't playing any music. Just white noise, just enough to block out the world. When she reached the lobby of Carlton West, she flashed her badge at the security desk like always. But today something was different. The guard, a man she'd nodded to every shift for the past 2 months, didn't open the gate. "I'm sorry, Miss Layton," he said. "You're not allowed past this point." Sophie blinked. There must be a mistake. He slid a sealed envelope across the counter. Her name was typed neatly on the front. "I was instructed to give you this and to escort you off the premises if necessary." She opened the letter right there. Termination notice. Reason: inappropriate conduct involving senior executive personnel, breach of company code of ethics. Her mouth went dry. She looked up, heart pounding. "I saved his life." The guard's eyes were kind but resigned. "I know." She turned and walked out. By noon it was all over the internet. Blurry, zoomed-in photos of Sophie kneeling over Miles. Headlines shouted from gossip blogs and clickbait sites. Janitor kisses CEO during collapse. Hero or hustler? Single mom shocks boardroom. CPR or seduction? Savior or gold digger? Someone had taken the CPR footage and edited it, cutting out the chest compressions, leaving only the moment Sophie gave mouth to mouth, slowed it down, added suggestive captions. The narrative took shape faster than truth could catch up. Late afternoon. Sophie had already received 2 rejection emails from other cleaning service companies. One interview she had scheduled was suddenly cancelled. She scrolled through comments under the articles. She probably planned this. Typical. Trying to sleep her way out of poverty. Bet she has a sob story too. Boo-hoo. Sophie dropped the phone. Her hands trembled. Outside, kids laughed on the sidewalk. Someone played music too loud from a car, but inside her apartment, the silence wrapped around her like a sentence. She didn't cry. Instead, she went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and stared at her reflection. Same tired eyes, same bun. And yet, nothing was the same. The days blurred. Sophie Layton walked from one end of the city to the other, clutching a worn folder filled with printed resumes and reference letters. Her shoes had started to wear thin. She had sewn a tear in her coat with dental floss. Every morning she left before Leia woke up, whispering to a neighbor to keep an eye on her, promising to be home by dark. She applied to every cleaning job she could find. Schools, motels, hospitals, fast food chains. At first, interviews seemed promising. One manager even smiled when he saw her resume. Then came the pause, the sideways glance at his computer screen. The quiet, "Oh, I didn't realize. You're that Sophie." Another job gone. The footage had gone viral. The internet moved fast. crueler than it was curious. The edited clip, just the moment of CPR, slowed down and captioned with insinuation, kept spreading. She stopped trying to correct it. No one wanted the truth. They wanted scandal. By the end of the week, Sophie had eaten nothing but instant noodles. 3 days in a row, she gave the last of the milk to Leia, mixing hot water with ketchup to make soup. When the girl asked for something warm, the inhaler on the nightstand was empty. No money to refill it. That night, Leia wheezed in her sleep. Sophie sat beside her, placing a cool cloth on her forehead, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's got you." But her own body had begun to betray her. Head pounding, limbs heavy, the world tilting when she stood up too fast. Fever clung to her like a second skin. The next morning, she left the apartment anyway. A job flyer crumpled in her coat pocket. On the subway platform, the lights grew too bright, her legs buckled. The last thing she saw before everything went black was the blur of people stepping around her. The news broke quietly. A small local outlet reporting, "Woman in viral CEO video collapses on subway platform, hospitalized for exhaustion." It took half a day for the story to reach Miles Everhart. He was in his office, ignoring back-to-back meetings, refreshing news pages, watching the online firestorm that refused to die. Sophie's name was still trending, for all the wrong reasons. Then he saw it, the headline. His breath caught. He clicked the article. Read it twice. Words jumped out. Extreme fatigue, single mother, possible malnourishment, unemployed. He sat back in his chair. The weight of guilt settled hard on his chest. No one had thanked her. No one had protected her. Least of all him. He picked up his coat and left the building without a word. The hospital room was quiet, save for the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor and the occasional hum of a passing cart in the hallway. Sophie lay still on the narrow bed, her skin pale against the thin white sheet, and IV dripping slowly into her arm. Her cheeks were flushed with fever, her lips dry. Her chest rose and fell shallowly, as if every breath required effort she no longer had to give. Beside her, Leia sat curled in a vinyl chair too big for her tiny frame, asleep with her arms wrapped around a frayed stuffed bear. One of her shoes had fallen to the floor. The other dangled from her heel. Her head rested on the edge of the mattress, as if she'd refused to sleep anywhere but next to her mother. The door creaked open. A figure stepped inside, moving quietly, deliberately. Miles Everhart. Gone was the polished suit, the commanding presence of a CEO. He wore a simple gray turtleneck under a dark wool coat. No security, no assistant. Just a man walking into a room he should have entered long ago. Sophie stirred slightly, sensing the movement. Her eyes fluttered open, cloudy with fever. It took a moment before her gaze focused on the man standing near the foot of her bed. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. "Are you here to tell me to leave the city?" Miles blinked. The question landed heavier than any accusation. He shook his head slowly. "No, I'm here to say thank you. And I'm sorry." Sophie let out a dry, bitter laugh, though it caught in her throat. Thank you doesn't pay rent. Sorry doesn't erase the headlines. He didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped closer and placed something gently on the small table beside her bed. A paper box, warm to the touch. "Chicken soup," he said. "Still hot. You need something warm. Just for tonight." Sophie stared at the box, unmoving. Her eyes flicked to his, searching for sarcasm, for pity. But there was none, only quiet sincerity. Then he pulled a folder from his coat and laid it next to the soup. "Internal documents," he said. "HR records, legal memos. You were terminated without process. I had no idea until yesterday, but I know now." Sophie didn't speak. He continued, voice lower. "I let someone save my life and then allowed everyone else to destroy hers. That ends today." Sophie didn't respond. Her eyes welled, but she didn't let the tears fall. She turned her head away, watching the line instead. For a moment neither said anything. Miles followed her gaze to the sleeping child. Leia shifted in her sleep, murmuring something incomprehensible. He stepped closer to her chair and gently picked up a folded blanket from the corner of the room. Without a word, he draped it over Leia's shoulders, tucking it in beneath her chin. His hand lingered just long enough to softly brush a lock of blonde hair from her face. "She's like you," he said softly. "Strong. Brave." He reached into the pocket of his coat and took out a small plush cat, its fur bright pink, a ribbon around its neck. "I wasn't sure what she liked, but I figured she might be a cat person." He placed the toy gently beside Leia, careful not to wake her. Then he turned to leave. His hand was on the door handle when he paused. He didn't look back right away. His voice, when it came, was steady, measured. "When you gave me breath, you didn't ask who I was. You didn't wait for permission. You just saved me." Now he turned, meeting her eyes one last time. "Let me try to save what the world took from you." And then he was gone. The room fell silent again, except for the monitor's beeping and the quiet rustle of Leia shifting beneath her new blanket. Sophie closed her eyes. For the first time in days, sleep came easily. The press conference room at Everhart Dynamics was unlike any gathering the building had hosted before. It was filled wall to wall with reporters, photographers, and cameras broadcasting live to every major news outlet in the country. The air buzzed with anticipation. The CEO of one of the world's most influential tech companies was about to speak for the first time since surviving cardiac arrest, and the public wanted answers. Flashbulbs popped as Miles Everhart walked to the podium. He looked composed but not rehearsed. His charcoal suit was crisp, but there was a new weight behind his eyes, a gravity that hadn't been there before. Sitting quietly in the front row was Sophie Layton, wearing a modest navy blue dress and a light cardigan. Her hair was tied in its usual bun, neater than usual. Beside her, Leia sat wide-eyed, clutching her new pink plush cat, swinging her legs silently. Miles looked over the crowd, then into the camera lens broadcasting to millions. He began. "I was clinically dead for over 2 minutes. I remember nothing about that day except the moment I woke up gasping for air with a single thought in my head. Someone brought me back." A hush settled over the room. That someone, he continued, was not a doctor or a board member or an executive. He paused. His voice, calm but resolute, cut through the air. "She was the janitor. The woman scrubbing the hall floors while we talked about million-dollar deals. The one no one saw until she was the only one who moved." Flashbulbs stopped. Silence thickened. "I'm alive today because of Sophie Layton, a woman this world nearly destroyed for doing what no one else had the courage to do." He tapped a button on the podium. Behind him, a projection screen lit up. Unedited security footage played. Sophie bursting into the boardroom, dropping to her knees, performing CPR with unwavering focus while executives recoiled, muttered, and recorded. The video didn't lie. The real story was there. In every compression, every breath, every moment of bravery. Miles turned back to the crowd. His voice deepened. What she did was not a kiss. It was CPR. It was courage. It was life-saving. He let the words settle. And what did she get in return? He continued. Shame. Humiliation. Termination. A murmur rippled through the audience. He looked straight into the cameras. My company failed her. Failed her. That ends today. He declared that all charges against Sophie had been rescinded. Her termination had been reversed. An internal investigation had led to the dismissal of several members of the PR and legal departments who had acted without authorization. He publicly apologized to her and to every worker who'd ever been treated as disposable. Sophie Layton is not invisible, he said firmly. She is not beneath us. She is the reason I am standing here today. The room erupted in applause. Reporters stood. Flashes returned. But Miles didn't smile. He didn't wave. Instead, he stepped down from the podium. He walked quietly and directly toward the front row. Sophie sat very still. When he reached her, he didn't bow deeply. He didn't kneel. He didn't reach for dramatics. He simply stood before her, one man to one woman, and extended his hand, palm open. It was not a handshake. It was a gesture of recognition, of humility, an offering of dignity. Sophie hesitated for just a moment. Then she reached out and laid her hand in his. Their fingers met. She gave the slightest steady squeeze. The cameras didn't matter. The applause faded. In that instant, everything else fell away. Not a romance, not a rescue, just recognition. From the highest office to the humblest hands, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. This time, Sophie Layton stepped out, not in her janitor's uniform, but in a simple blouse and skirt. Her hands weren't calloused from bleach, and she wasn't pushing a cart. She stood a little straighter, moved a little slower, each step uncertain but deliberate. The same marble floors, the same glass walls, but everything felt different. Miles's assistant greeted her politely and led her to the corner office. His office. She hesitated before stepping in, but the quiet voice of her daughter behind her gave her strength. Leia toddled in, holding her drawing pad tight to her chest, her pink cat plushie tucked under one arm. Inside, Miles Everhart rose from his desk, not with corporate stiffness, but with a warm, respectful nod. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Please sit." Sophie did. He handed her a slim folder, no more than 10 pages. "I want to start something new here," he said. "An initiative dedicated to the people who keep this place running but are never seen. Janitors, security guards, kitchen staff, drivers." He paused, watching her closely. "I want you to design it." Sophie blinked. "You mean help?" "No," he said gently. "I mean lead it. You'd be the director." She stared at the folder like it might burn her hands. "I don't have a degree," she said softly. "I've never managed a team. People won't see me as a director." Miles gave a quiet laugh, low but not mocking. "You don't need a diploma to know what it feels like to be invisible. You don't need an MBA to recognize where people hurt." He leaned forward slightly. "You've lived it. You know what change should look like because you know what it feels like to be forgotten." Sophie didn't speak for a long moment. Her fingers traced the edge of the folder. In the corner of the room, Leia sat cross-legged on the floor, scribbling on a page with a pink crayon. Then she stood, walked to her mother, and tugged gently at her sleeve. Sophie looked down. Leia held up her drawing, a picture of Sophie with a superhero cape, standing next to a smiling man in a suit. Between them was a building with a big heart on it. Leia leaned in and whispered, "You saved someone's life, Mama. Now maybe you can save your own too." The room stilled. Sophie closed her eyes briefly, breathed in, then opened the folder. She looked back at Miles. "I don't want a fancy desk," she said. "I want to be on the floor with them, listening." Miles smiled. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." They signed the papers right there. No confetti, no champagne. Just two people making a decision they both knew was right. 3 weeks later, Sophie stood in her new office. Modest, bright. A nameplate on the glass read, "Sophie Layton, Director, People First Initiative." The space had been intentionally designed without walls between her and the staff. Her desk sat at the same level as everyone else's. Photos of employees, cleaners, drivers, cooks, lined the bulletin board behind her. She adjusted a stack of folders, brushed a strand of golden hair behind her ear. Her bun was neater today, her smile steadier. Leia sat beside her on a small couch, swinging her legs and drawing again. This time a park, a sun, and a cat with a crown through the open door. Miles passed by, then stopped. He leaned gently against the doorframe, watching for a moment. "You've made this place feel warmer," he said. Sophie turned toward him. "Not just me." He nodded once. Then he left her to it, with a look that said more than words ever could. She turned back to her desk where new resumes waited. Voices she would listen to, lives she would not let be forgotten. And for the first time in years, Sophie Layton was not surviving. She was building. The conference room had never seen this kind of gathering before. No suits, no titles, no tech jargon on screens. Instead, rows of folding chairs were filled with janitors, kitchen staff, night shift guards, cafeteria workers. faces weathered by long hours, overlooked effort, and silence swallowed over years. At the front stood Sophie Layton. No microphone, no podium. Just her voice, just her heart. She took a breath and looked around the room. These were her people. The ones who mopped the marble before sunrise. The ones who stayed behind when everyone else had gone home. She stepped forward. I used to scrub these floors while board members walked past without seeing me. Not because they were cruel, but because no one ever taught them to look. No one is born to be invisible, she said gently. And starting today, no voice in this building will go unheard. Not on my watch. Silence fell. Not the kind born of fear, but the kind that comes when people realize they've finally been seen. Then came the clapping, slow, then stronger, until it filled the entire room. After the meeting, as the employees trickled out, some wiping away tears, some just nodding in gratitude, Sophie lingered. She was stacking papers, clearing coffee cups, when she noticed it. A small bouquet resting on the corner of her desk. White daisies, modest and bright. Tucked between the stems was a handwritten card. Plain and without embellishment, she opened it. For the woman who gave me breath when no one else would. M. Sophie stared at the note for a long moment. Her fingers brushed the petals, and something in her chest softened. Not pain, not even gratitude, but something quieter. A warmth that asked nothing in return that night. The city was quiet under a veil of winter air. On the balcony of a modest apartment high above the street, Sophie stood with Leah, wrapped together under a thick shawl. The lights of Manhattan shimmered in the distance, but Sophie's eyes weren't on the skyline. They were on the building across the street, on the window that was still lit, Miles's office. She pulled the scarf tighter around her daughter's shoulders and whispered, I never thought I'd get to step out of the dark like this. Leah leaned into her. Are you happy now, Mama? Sophie paused. She didn't answer right away. Then, eyes still fixed on that single glowing window, she said quietly, For the first time in my life I feel seen. Leah smiled. Sophie kissed the top of her head. On the other side of the glass, Miles stood by his desk, the light of the city casting long shadows across the room. In his hand, he held a folded drawing, Leah's gift from the press conference. A stick figure version of himself, a tall blonde woman beside him, and a child in the middle holding both their hands. He smiled, not with triumph, not with relief, but with something else, hope. He looked down toward the balcony across the street where two small silhouettes stood wrapped in one another. He didn't wave. He didn't move. He just stayed there, watching, quiet, present. And for the first time in his life he didn't feel alone in the tower. He felt connected, not through status, not through debt, but through something that asked no promises, only presence. A beginning. Nothing more but nothing less. If this story moved you, we invite you to stay with us on this journey of humanity, hope, and healing. At Soul-Stirring Stories, we believe in the quiet power of everyday people. The janitor, the single mother, the silent hero, who show us what courage truly means. If Sophie's story touched your heart, please hit that like button to let us know. And don't forget to subscribe for more emotional, true-to-life stories that lift your spirit and restore your faith in the goodness of people. Thank you for watching and for feeling with us.